Hello, everyone. My name is Julia, and I'll be the main facilitator of tonight's event. I am currently the secretary for IVNVI. I see Maggie here as well. Maggie, if you want to say hi. Maggie is our president. But thank you to the guests for joining us today and volunteering your time. And I hope that this session is really beneficial for the audience that we have tonight. And we will be recording this session for anyone that wants to watch it at a later date. So first, if we can get a round of introductions from everyone. So we'll start with the fourth years. If you can introduce yourself by stating your name, program, and the programs and areas that you've applied to or are committing to, that'd be great. So we'll start off with Taylor C.
Okay, hi everybody. My name is Taylor, and I'm currently in my fourth year in the forensic anthropology specialist. And next year, I will be heading off to do biological anthropology.
I'll pass it on to Nella.
Hello, everyone. My name is Nella, and I'm currently in the forensic chemistry specialist, and I will be starting law school in September. Still undecided about where I'm going.
And Virginia.
Hello, everyone. My name is Virginia. I am in my fourth year at the forensic biospecialist. I've accepted my master's offer for applied bioscience at Ontario Tech, which I'll be starting in September.
Taylor H.
Hi, everyone. So my name is Taylor. I'm in my fourth year of the forensic psychology specialist, and I've applied for psychology masters and forensic psychology masters.
And lastly, Yoshika.
Hi everyone, my name is Yoshika and I'm in my fourth year of the forensic psych program, and I've applied for clinical psych and experimental psych in forensics.
And we'll pass it on to the grad students. Alex, could you talk a little about what you did your undergrad in and where you are now?
Yeah, so I did my undergrad. I did the double major of forensic science and biology, and I am currently doing my master's in forensic science, specializing in biology, and I'm doing it at the University of Strathclyde, which is in Glasgow, Scotland.
I'll pass it on to Wilson.
Hi, everyone. I did my undergrad in forensic chemistry as a specialist with research in my fourth year with Dr. Vivian Luke. And currently I'm a second year PhD student at the University of Toronto in the Winnick group researching heavy metal nanoparticles.
Grace.
Hi, everyone. So when I was at UTM, I was a forensic anthropology specialist, and I just finished my master's at the University of Waterloo in public issues anthropology in the bioarchaeology area.
Pass it on to Kathy.
Hi everyone, my name is Kathy and I graduated from the Forensic Anthropology Specialist program, and I'm currently at Simon Fraser University, starting my master's right now in archaeology with the specialization in forensic anthro and ancient and forensic DNA.
I'll pass that on to Angelica.
Hi everyone, I'm Angelica. I did my undergrad in the Forensic Biology Specialist program, and now I am doing a Master's of Science in Forensic Genetics within Evolutionary Anthropology here at the University of Toronto under Dr. Nicole Nowrosky's research lab.
Lastly, Charlotte.
Hi, so I did the Forensic Anthropology Specialist when I was at UTM. I did a Master's of Science in Human Osteoarchaeology at the University of Edinburgh up in Scotland. And in September, I'll be starting a combined degree program, so 2 masters in 3 years at U of T in museum studies and in information specializing in archives.
All right, so we have a very diverse group of students that are going to answer a ton of our questions tonight. So thank you for introductions, and we're going to jump right into the predetermined questions. So the first section is going to be questions based for the fourth year students that have just gone through the application process. And the first question is for all of the fourth years. Can you talk a little about what the application was like? What did you need to prepare? What did you need to take any standardized tests? That kind of thing. If anyone wants to jump in, go ahead.
I can start if you want. Okay, so I applied for clinical psychology and forensic psychology programs. And I applied to a variety of schools. So some of them had different processes. None of them had standardized tests, but some of them did have like essay questions to answer, as well as additional like statements of interest or reasons that I wanted to go to the school. And then also letters of reference. They all had a letter of reference too.
I'll pass it on to Taylor. See?
Sure. So with my application process, I had similar to Taylor H, and it was mostly just statements of intent and my CV. But with both biological anthropology programs I applied to, I also had to give a sample of writing and have 2 to 3 reference letters. I think also a big thing that was just, I don't know if it's specific to anthropology, but reaching out to the professors before you submit your applications was super important. So I always tried to have Zoom meetings or some kind of conversation on email before I sent in any applications.
I'll pass it on to Nella.
Yes, so for law school, you need to take the law school admission test, which is the LSAT. And typically it varies depending on the school, but typically the latest you can write that is January of the year you intend to start school, but that's not really recommended. Most recommend by November of the year that you're applying. Applications for Ontario law schools are due November 1st, and that's all through OSAS, which is OUAC. And if anybody applied for, Ontario undergrad, I'm not sure if it's specific if you're in Ontario, you use OUAC or if everyone uses it, but it's kind of that same platform. And for Ontario law schools, you can just upload all of the information on there. Each one required its own statement of interest, and each one has slightly different requirements, and 2 letters of reference, and that also varies depending on the school. So some it was 2 academic references, and some wanted 1 academic reference and 1 preferable with some sort of community involvement. So that just varies depending on the school. I think I mentioned everything that's needed: letters of reference, statement of interest, LSAT, and typically applying by November 1st. Yeah.
I know you mentioned that Ontario schools have their own platform. What about schools outside of Ontario?
Yes, so within Canada, outside of Ontario, you apply directly to each school. So for example, UBC, UCalgary, Dalhousie, the schools that I applied to, it's all on their law school website, and the application process it's kind of like a portal that you log into, and you have to have a login for it, and you upload everything on there. It's very similar things in terms of letters of reference and statement of interest. I did forget to mention, and it's really annoying, for most of these, you don't really get to submit a CV. You have to individually input everything, and it's usually categorized based on like work, volunteer, research. So that kind of gets inputted separately as well.
Awesome, and I'll pass it on to Virginia.
Okay, yes, hello. So I guess my experience applying for grad school was very overwhelming at first, but it helped just kind of go back to the basics. So a lot of, like my peers said, it was having your CV / your resume ready, your letter of intent or letter of research for some programs, and your letters of recommendation. All of the programs I applied to had a minimum of 2. And for a lot of the programs, they require that you send a transcript, whether it's official or unofficial is up to the school itself, but grad schools love to see numbers, so give them numbers. And then to keep on top of the deadlines, I made a master document of all the programs I was interested in, and then I copy pasted literally verbatim everything on their website, like from what the requirements were. So like how many letters of recommendation, when their deadlines were, when, like what the deposit was for the application fee, all those kinds of things I wrote down, so then I could always go back instead of having to like look through 60 links to get to a certain website. And then in order to prepare all these documents, especially the letters of recommendation, I guess a lot of people would be asking within the U of T community, so your profs and stuff. So just making sure you have a good relationship with your profs and they know who you are versus like you just show up to their class, maybe ask one question and then like dip. They're not going to know who you are. So you don't have to be buddy with your profs, but just make sure you actively engage in the class and your professors will notice who you are and are able to write a good letter of recommendation for you. Because when you ask professors to write these letters for you, they know the gravity or like the weight of grad schools. So you always have to specify, even if you think they already know, just ask for a strong letter of recommendation.
And I guess just to piggyback off of letters of recommendation, it seems like most programs require them. What would you say to a third year who is applying next year and doesn't know how to approach a professor for a letter of recommendation, or how would you go about getting one?
Oh, that is a good question. I know it's a little tougher just because like the last few years have been online, so that's not doesn't really open up the floor for a lot of students to be able to interact with the professors online. I still get those questions from like my mentees and stuff for that are first years. My greatest advice to you is like take every opportunity within like your comfort zone to reach out to your professor. So whether that's like going to their office hours online, or I know some profs have like opened up the floor for in-person office hours. Now that things are in person, just take those opportunities, take those like 2 seconds to say like hi after class, before class, ask small questions, make some small talk, but don't like suck up because they know. But just kind of like be genuine and let them know that you're present for them as a student, and then your work ethic and stuff shows through like your grades and stuff, because they can just pull that up. So my advice would just kind of be like, don't be afraid to reach out, because a lot of professors, I've spoken to some and they're like, you would be surprised how many people don't show up to office hours, and the ones that do show up to office hours, like they're like the professors know them by their first name, ask how they are, ask how their dog is, like all those kinds of things. So just don't be afraid to reach out, because your professors, as scary as a concept as they are, especially online, they're just people. So just ask and make a connection.
Thank you. And lastly, Yoshika, if you could talk about what your application process was like and what that entailed.
Yeah, so I think it's pretty much the same. So CV, letter of intent. I do want to add that for psychology, in normal years or typical years, you have the GRE, which is kind of like a standardized test, so like the LSAT, but for psych schools. It's been canceled and schools are leaning towards canceling it permanently, but no official decision has been made yet. So we don't know if it'll be reinstated for September, but I would, if you are planning to apply, I would keep an eye out for that just in case you end up having to study for it and then you don't want to do that over like 2 weeks. But everything else was pretty much the same.
Awesome. So a lot of information, a lot that is needed. Taylor C, where can students go to find information about a specific program, or is there a website that you would recommend them going to?
Yeah, so specifically with mine, I mostly focused on the school itself. So there wasn't a big repository of all the biological anthropology programs. You can stick it into Google and it does give you results. However, it's for programs that you're doing research in, it's very professor based. So looking at professors' profiles on universities that have biological anthropology programs or that have the program that you're choosing to study. And then they usually have a graduate tab that tells you how to apply, what you need to apply with, and all of that information.
Nella, would you say it's more or less the same thing for law school? Or is there something somewhere else to go to?
So as I was mentioning, where you apply OLSAS, on there for the Ontario Law Schools, they actually break down all of the requirements and all of the information for each school. And then you can go to each individual school and it does direct you to them to get further information. So that's a really good resource for the Ontario schools. And then each law school does have its own website with information. And a lot of the law schools will do information sessions in the fall. So that's another great place to kind of get your questions answered, and then also kind of clarify anything that you weren't really too sure about on the application.
Awesome. So Virginia, what were your backup plans in case grad school didn't work out?
Yes, that's a good question. Always have a backup plan. anything can fall through no matter what. Nothing is guaranteed. I'm sorry, that's just how it is. Essentially, for my backup plan, it was to look at other programs. So I essentially wanted to give myself like a budget to apply for 5 schools. Applications are really expensive. I don't casually have $700 to $100. So I narrowed it down to 3. And then I applied to those 3, and then kind of went from whatever I get, whatever sticks to the wall. But even then, if I wasn't hypothetically accepted to any of grad schools, my plan would be to apply again in the next year, but in the meantime, find full-time work, because before I had heard back for like my acceptance to Ontario Tech, I was throwing resumes left, right, center all over Indeed. I did get a full-time job offer in Guelph at a company that works with like livestock, biological fluids, you know, just like making baby cows. And they wanted to offer me a full-time job for after graduation, because they're like, we see you're graduating. Do you want to just like come work with us full-time permanently instead of just over the summer? And I was like, sorry, I'm going back to school. So they were like, okay, psych, no thanks. But don't be afraid of a rejection, because it's not the end of the world. I remember sitting in this exact panel as one of the 3rd-year students, kind of being very anxious about applying for grad school. It's very overwhelming. Rejection will happen. I'm not saying like you're not allowed to feel sad about it. It's just something you're going to have to grit through. And once you're done processing it, go from what can I do next? And don't be afraid of not being able to find work. I know the job market isn't like too great right now because of COVID. But I think even just receiving that brief job offer from myself without even like having graduated yet, it gave me a lot of confidence in my abilities, because U of T's programs offer you really marketable skills, and you gain a lot of skills. And if you know how to write your resumes and your cover letters and really sell yourself, like employers will find you. There's always going to be a job out there for you. So my backup plan, essentially, long story short, was to find work and then just go back, try again for grad school.
So don't sell yourself short, put yourself out there. And for the 3rd years, IVNVI is hosting a CV resume career center panel. If you want to learn how to market yourself, great opportunity. That was a perfect segue. Thank you, Virginia. But our last question for the 4th years is, Yashika, can you talk about finding a supervisor and what that means for grad school, and if you needed to find one, and how you would approach that?
Yes, so for psychology, you do need to find a professor. So you're applying to the school, but more specifically, you're applying to work with the specific professor at that university. And around September, usually all universities post on their page which professors are accepting. And they usually ask you to list your top 2 to 3 preferences into your statement of interest itself. I would recommend sticking to like 1 to 2, because the more professors you list, the more broad you look and you don't seem as specialized. That's what I experienced for when I was applying. And yeah, so you basically see who's accepting, you look into their research. And as someone mentioned, it's really good to reach out to them before you apply. And a lot of times they'll schedule informal Zoom meetings. And even for you, that's a really good opportunity to see if the research that they do is actually what you like to do, or if you're just wasting $100 down the drain and then you end up not liking what they actually do. So yeah, that's what I have to add.
Awesome, thank you. And I know you're very specialized in the psych field. Do other 4th years know what other programs would require supervisors, and whether you would reach out personally, or if the school would match you with a supervisor?
Sorry, was that question for me?
Oh, it's for anyone that wants to talk about it. Yeah.
I can talk on anthropology. We did need to find a supervisor. Most programs that have a research component will require you to connect with a prof. So as Rashika said, it's always good to reach out to them beforehand to understand what kind of research you can do there and what if they're looking to take any students.
Thank you. All right, we will segue into questions for the grad students, and we'll start off with Wilson. Can you speak a little about the workload comparing grad school to undergrad?
Yeah, so it depends on what program you're in, and I can only speak to what program I'm in. Currently, I'm in the PhD stream for polymer chemistry, and you still have courses to take, but generally you're only taking about 1 course per semester. And the majority of your work is actually divided into research with a large focus on that. So the most interesting thing about it is you get to set your own schedule, and you do get to balance your own workload. And this also does change not only between programs. So another program may be more course focused, but even between labs within the same department. So a good thing to do before you even join a lab is to talk to the graduate students within that lab. So for instance, my lab is very lax in terms of research work, and our reactions that we research aren't very taxing. So our research work isn't as heavy as someone in, say, another lab, even within the same department. So I think the Kumacheva lab, their lab is very heavy in terms of research, so they don't have a lot of time. But the Winnick research group, we're quite lax, and the workload isn't too bad. I don't know if anyone else has experienced the same thing.
All right, I will relay that same question to Alex. Can you speak a little about the workload in grad school and comparing it to your undergrad?
I just think that I'm gonna go full out. I just think that here it's very relaxed. Definitely a different education system, and I think that just plays a very big role. The Scotland education system is very relaxed. So I will say that first semester was harder than my semester now. And even saying that, first semester was probably at least 5 times easier than the workload I had in my undergrad. So I got here and I was in that U of T mindset. And it was very different, extremely different, I would say. So you definitely are a little bit more relaxed. The program I'm in is a little bit different. So I know when I was applying to a bunch of universities, some of them I had to find supervisors, some of them I didn't. The program I'm in right now, you actually don't have to. So we still do research, but the way that their research works is you just get into the program and then you kind of pick your research project and you get assigned to a research project around now. So that was one thing about the program was I didn't have to find a research, a supervisor at least. I'm kind of just dealing with it now. But it is definitely a little bit more relaxed. You definitely have more free time. And then come your research project, it's kind of like what Wilson was saying, we're allowed to pick our own schedule. So the first 2 semesters are just course-based, you have your 5 courses, but I would definitely say 5 courses here versus 5 courses at U of T are definitely nowhere near the same.
So it seems like it's more on the relaxed side. Does any of the grad students have an opposite where they're super busy now and undergrad is a breeze for them?
Well, it wasn't exactly opposite per se because I was also in Scotland, but I had a lot of lab tests. So you were in the lab basically every day trying to memorize those bones for those lab tests. And even if you didn't have a lot of coursework, the coursework you had 1 assignment determining your entire grade, or you had 2 assignments determining your entire grade. So you felt like you had a lot of free time because you weren't doing homework every night, but then that assignment would creep up and you're like, oh yeah, this is for my entire grade. But yeah, and same thing for the supervisor. I didn't have to find a supervisor because it's the same sort of, you had 2 semesters of courses and then you did your thesis, dissertation. So same thing about the supervisor, but the courses, it depends on the teacher and it depends on the course.
Thank you. The next question is for Grace. What did you find the most challenging in grad school?
Yeah, so I started grad school in September 2020. So as we all know, back in September 2020, we did not know where we were going to be a year or a year and a half from then. And I was actually supposed to go to Greece last summer for my research and work on some skeletons there. But it ended up not working out because Greece was literally on fire. So I had to change my project to work with skeletons that we already had in the lab. And because of that, I actually had to rewrite an entire chapter of my thesis with very short notice because my thesis was all about, how this project related to Greece, and now we aren't in Greece anymore. So basically it was just kind of rolling with the uncertainties. And even if COVID is much more stable by the time you get into grad school, just know that whenever you're doing research, something can go wrong, and most likely something will go wrong. And it's just learning how to make the best out of what you already have, and like working smarter instead of like being really stressed over what you don't have.
I have the same question for Angelica. What did you find the most challenging in grad school?
For sure. So I think for me specifically, like I said, I am in the Navrosky Research Lab, and Dr. Navrosky, I'm sure like some of you already know, she's a pretty brand new professor. And so I was like back in September 2020, like that was her first set of grad students. So I was her first master's student, and she had two other PhD students that came in that same cycle. And so I think the most difficult thing has been the growing pains of a brand new lab, and kind of having to deal with like expectations and like how everyone like fits into the lab. And I still think like that's still kind of an issue, just because like September 2020, like because of COVID and everything, that entire first year nobody was really in the lab. So it's only like maybe this semester where people have started coming into lab and actually doing like lab work on a pretty regular schedule. So yeah, so I would also recommend for anybody that's applying for either a master's or a PhD, like a direct entry PhD, to definitely try and maybe scope out a lab that's a bit more settled and a supervisor that has a lot of like mentorship experience, because they've gone through several cycles of grad students. And that way I think there's like a better kind of flow and less uncertainty that kind of comes with being in a super brand new lab and not really having anything set up and no like roles really assigned for students in terms of not necessarily the research, but in terms of like your just like regular lab upkeep and like what you should be contributing to the lab as like a team. So that's definitely something to look out for. And I think another really helpful way to do that is, I think Wilson mentioned this, to actually go and talk to the grad students that are already in that lab if possible. They will kind of give you the inside scoop as to whether this is a lab that you should come to, or if the like work environment's like not so great. So that's definitely something that you should keep in mind, and definitely something to like reach out to.
Wilson?
Yeah, I just wanted to chime in here regarding the age of a lab. It's a good point that newer labs will be a little more hectic with setup, but you also want to be careful with older labs, because sometimes the supervisor has been doing something in one way for so long, it's really hard to get them out of that really archaic way. And that's certainly the case with my lab. My supervisor's pushing like 75 now, and he's got some really old ways of doing research, and we're trying to get him out of it. So just be aware of that as well.
Thank you. And I know you mentioned that reaching out to the current grad students would be a great way to get the scope of the lab. How would you recommend students to do so, and what's the most appropriate way to reach out to grad students?
Should I answer this question?
Sure, it's open to anyone, but
yeah, so like I think one of the best ways to do it is like, now that we're kind of transitioning out of like the pandemic and trying to do more in-person stuff, a really great way is to like ask that supervisor to maybe like shadow them or kind of have a tour of the lab. And usually like now that everybody's kind of back in lab, like you have the chance to like kind of go up to maybe like grad students and be like, hey, like I'd really love to connect, just to like see what the vibe of this lab is like. And I think that's a really good way to do it. Or a lot of supervisors have their own personal website, as well as like websites as part of like U of T, and they list who their grad students are. So you can always do like a quick like search on like LinkedIn or something and see if like that person's actually in that lab, and kind of reach out to them via other like ways, either through email, LinkedIn, or like anything like that. And so those are a couple of ways I think that would really help for you to like reach out to grad students.
Thank you. Alex?
Yeah, just touching up on that. I would say for me, the biggest way was LinkedIn. And that's also because when I got accepted into Strathclyde, I was kind of debating between like 2 or 3 universities. I easily ruled it down to 2, but then I didn't really know anything about like any students that went to Strathclyde. I mean, like what all and other profs have told me about students that went there, but I personally like only heard it from people who are already working at the Center of Forensic Science or like our profs. And so for me, LinkedIn was a really big way. I just went on like the Strathclyde Forensic Science LinkedIn page and saw some of their graduates, and I reached out to them from there. And I actually like talked to them, and I still talk to a lot of them to this day. So I think for me, LinkedIn was a very big like thing, just because again, like that school was a little bit farther away, so it wasn't. I could talk to somebody, and I also think it was just because there wasn't an actual lab, and you kind of just get given a research project, and you just don't know it until later. So yeah, for me, LinkedIn was a very big one.
Wilson?
Yeah, I don't know if this was mentioned, but certain programs will also have different events that you can attend, and the graduate students will be present and giving poster presentations about different projects going on in the lab. So in the case of chemistry, if you were accepted early, we had grad student weekend. And I think if you are not accepted in that initial batch of students, then there's also a supervisor selection week where you can also talk to the supervisors during that time. And I think in Department of Chemistry, they set up meetings with various professors for us.
Awesome. All right. So our last question for Charlotte, can you speak a little on funding? What is funding and how are we supposed to get it?
Yeah, so I think it also depends sort of on the school. So sometimes they'll have, if you apply by a certain date, you're automatically considered for certain fundings. So I know U of T did that, and the University of Edinburgh also had that. Also, there are a bunch of different fundings you can apply to. For University of Edinburgh, I didn't actually apply to any funding. But so for my thesis, I needed to use the chemistry lab for a bit, and so I used their machine. So I had to pay the chemistry lab to use their machine, and my faculty covered it. So I sort of just had to send in my receipt, and the faculty would have covered it. But for my upcoming master's, there's certain ones you can apply for once you start your program. So it really depends. Yeah.
And Kathy, can you speak on your experience with funding, being not an Ontario student, and kind of what it looks like for you?
Yeah, so with funding, I would express like a word of caution when reading your offer letters, because every school kind of has like a different funding program, and a lot of you are probably most familiar with the U of T funding program, where it's one of the only schools that will guarantee you funding for a certain number of years, whereas a lot of the other schools do not guarantee after your first year. So a lot of your offers only have like a 1-year amount of funding. I would honestly just reach out to your supervisors or whoever else you can connect to at the department and ask them for more clarity, or even like the grad chair or whoever sent you the letter, because there's a lot of funding that you can get that isn't guaranteed, and a lot of schools have this model. It's just because with U of T, they get so much funding that they're capable of guaranteeing funding for several years, whereas a lot of other universities aren't as able to guarantee it for you, but a lot of times you're very likely to get funding for further years. And there's also, so there's a lot of funding, I think that was mentioned, that you can apply for when you're there, but there's also funding that you can apply for as an incoming student, or entrance scholarships and things like that that you'll be assessed for that they don't tell you about. So just ask. Just ask and just be honest with your supervisors that it's something that you're concerned about. And that's what I did when I first started, because I was so used to the U of T model, and it sounded like they were saying that you wouldn't be funded for your second or your third year in the program, but that's absolutely not true. And I'm also in a mix of like a lab-based and like a lab-based program. And the research that I do and the lab work that I do, it's actually funded by my like the lab funds. And so I don't pay to use like certain chemicals or certain supplies and things like that. So that's also an important part to consider as well. And if you're staying within Canada, there's also tri-agency funding, and you're quite likely to get it, I would say. Most students would get it, especially if you're a master's student. You can apply before you start. So the deadline has consistently been like December 1st. So you can apply the year before, or you can apply once you're in your first year of the program. If you apply before, which is what I did, you can select up to 3 schools. So even if you don't know for sure which school you're going into because you probably haven't finished your applications yet, you can let them know that you're interested in these schools. And once the decisions are made, you can apply it to those schools if you get the offer for those schools. So there's quite a lot out there. It's just that they won't say it explicitly. So definitely be careful when you're making your decisions.
Thank you. And Grace?
Yeah, so I just wanted to piggyback off what Kathy was saying about the tri-agency scholarships. So it's called the Canada Graduate Scholarship Masters. And when you are in a research-based program in Canada, you're automatically eligible to apply. And it's a good idea to get this scholarship, even if your school does offer funding, because like for me, it offered relatively comparable funding, but something like this is really good to have on your resume for when you're applying to future degrees, because these are big research awards that are recognized all across Canada, and something like that, they're definitely going to expect that you have when you're applying for a PhD in the field. Another thing that you can do, oh, thanks, Kathy, is that you can apply for the Ontario Graduate Scholarship if you're in Ontario. So if you're in Ontario, you should apply for both of them, because if you get them both, then you can take the CGSM the first year and then apply again for the Ontario Graduate Scholarship. So you should definitely try to like shoot your shot everywhere and then take the best one. And then the last piece of advice I have is don't have imposter syndrome like me and not apply when you're an incoming student. I know there's a lot to think about when you're applying to grad school already, and I just didn't want to think about having to apply for funding on top of it. But if you do get the CGSM in your first year or the OGS in your first year, then that gives you the opportunity to get the other one in your second year. And having 2 awards is always really, really good.
Thank you. Sorry, I don't know which hands came up first. Maggie, do you know?
Yes, I think it was Ange.
Yeah, for sure, I can go. So yeah, I was kind of echoing the sentiments that Grace kind of said. I did do mine a little bit differently because I looked at what the funding was and like how much I would get and the breakdown prior to kind of accepting my thing into the program. Essentially, like for the Masters for Anthropology or the Masters of Science specifically, you get funded for your first year, but not for your second year. So although I did apply for like the tri-agency funding, like in my first year, I think it was better that I had actually done it in my second year because I was not funded at all for my second year. So my first year, the amount that any of the tri-agency funding I would have gotten for the CGSM, the Canada Graduate Scholarships for Masters, actually would not have exceeded the initial funding that I got for my first year. So I got more in my first year than if I had like taken like an award, but then in my second year I received the CGSM, so I was able to kind of like get the best of both worlds, I suppose. And it's definitely important to kind of discuss with your supervisor like how you're going to kind of tackle these grants, how much ideally like you would want your supervisor to also want the grants for you, because like any money is good money. And so like
it's important to kind of talk to them regarding like, for example, like you will need a supervisor's letter of support and or like reference letter, and one of them like really should be your supervisor. So you should really send your supervisor your materials in advance and kind of set down those expectations regarding like how long of a time they need to be able to put those like references in. And so I think that's really important. And it's also important to know that there's a lot of funding within the university itself for graduate students, and like this might not be like really big fancy awards, but I still think it's important because a lot of the awards that are available can be for like really kind of niche or specialized research that like your research could fall into, or for BIPOC students, or for like students that require that extra funding. There's a lot of different ways to like get that money, and I think it's important to kind of explore all of your avenues and see what the university has, what like external funding agencies have, and just apply for as much as you can without kind of straying from like your research and not only applying for grants the entire time.
Thank you. Charlotte?
Yeah, just one more thing to mention is that you can also always get, depending on, sometimes Canada can give you loans or bursaries as well. I'm from Quebec, so Canada doesn't give me any of that. I have to apply through Quebec. So maybe your province can give you that, and also there's also student line of credit. So there can also be some banks that can help you out. It's a loan, so you will have to pay them back. But if you don't get any scholarships, that's another avenue you can take.
Kathy?
I just wanted to add on to the tri-council agency funding, but Grace kind of touched on this, but once you get the funding like offer from whatever council you apply to, your university should reach out to you and they'll let you know how it works with them, and the way it works will differ between each school. So some schools will offer you like a top up or additional scholarship because you won the award, whereas some school, the offer from the tri-agency council will actually replace your entrance offer. So be very careful and really assess like which is better for you, because you can always apply again in your second year if needed. So there's that. And another thing I wanted to think a lot of students aren't aware of this, at least not to my knowledge, but you can still, if you're an Ontario student, you can still apply for Osap and still get funding through that, because a lot of graduate students don't know that they're still eligible for Osap, but you actually are. So even if you're in another province, as I am, you can still continue to apply for Osap.
Thank you. Alex?
Just quickly going based off what Charlotte said as well. So being in Scotland, there's not really much funding. You kind of just got to be prepared to pay it, honestly. Like, I will say, like, even when it comes to finding a place to live, if you're not living on campus, a lot of places are like you pay it in full, or you have to pay for like a guarantor, which is a whole other process. So I will say funding was very, very different. I ended up applying for OSAP, and they did give me some. I know a lot of people that are like from the GTA or even from the States, they just have loans through their banks. I did get like a scholarship through my program, and it was just like a basic scholarship. A lot of people get it, but that wasn't like nearly like close to what your overall tuition is. So I would say that like if you are planning on going abroad, scholarships aren't necessarily an offer. I think like Charlotte mentioned, she didn't really apply to these. I applied to a lot of like external scholarships. However, it might be a little bit different in the year I came in, because the year I came in was when Brexit became full in effect. So they're no longer in the EU. So whether you are like hold an EU passport or you don't, doesn't really matter to them. They're like, you're an international they don't care. And adding on to that, they did actually increase all international fees because they officially left the EU. So they racked up all prices because they were like, yeah, you guys are international. Yeah. So it's be prepared that you won't really get any funding. It's just a very different situation going internationally.
Thank you. And Yoshika?
Yeah, I just wanted to add, like, from the perspective of someone who applied this year in psych, I remember that a lot of my applications actually asked me if I applied for funding. It's like one of those yes or no questions. And I think it's very like, it's unspoken, it's like an unspoken rule where like you should apply if you want to be considered like having a good grade. It's like an unspoken rule that you need a good grade to apply. It's kind of now becoming an unspoken rule. And so I just wanted to point that out, that a lot of them just ask you if you applied and you have to indicate that in your application.
Awesome, thank you. So a lot going on with funding, but I will direct the questions to the audience to see if the audience has any questions that they would like to ask. If you have any questions, please just put them in the chat. And if you have a specific guest that you would like to direct it to, please also indicate that in your question. All right, while we wait for questions to come in, I guess a question for myself is, what made you decide to commit to the program that you are in now, or you will be going in into the fall? If anyone wants to jump in.
Sorry, can you repeat the question quickly?
Yeah, so what made you decide to go to this school that you are now, or the program you are, or the school that you will be attending this fall?
I can touch on that because I think I went through. So I narrowed down when I was applying for masters. For me, it was between the U of T one, which I think Angelica is in with Navrosky, where I am right now, and Laurentian. I think I got rejected from U of T, so that got ruled out very quickly. And then when it came to Laurentian and Strathclyde, I went back and forth for a very long time. For me, one of the main things was that over the summer I was working with the coroners, and I knew a lot of people at Center for Forensic Science, and a lot of them actually did the masters here in Strathclyde. And then another thing was that the Laurentian program was brand new. So if I would have started in September, I would have been the second entering class, which means that the people who are already in it haven't even graduated, which means jobs don't really know about the masters. When I also had to make a decision, Laurentian was going through the whole bankruptcy thing. And I honestly just didn't want to get stuck in that. I knew I knew Strathclyde was a really good school, and I knew a lot of people that like went to Strathclyde, like Woodall, a bunch of my professors also mentioned it. So that's kind of why I narrowed down to Strathclyde. I will say, if I was to do it all over again, I would be a little bit different in my decision.
Thank you. I see a question in the chat for current grad students. How do you advocate for yourself or opportunities in your program with your supervisor? Yep. Angelica?
So I think this is kind of like, from what I'm understanding from the question, I think it kind of just boils down to expectations. There are a lot of things happening. I get like 50,000 emails like literally every day, just for like workshops or like socials, or like the ability to like go and do an exchange with another university. And like there is like a lot of stuff going on, and a lot of very like tempting things going on. So I think it's important to like set expectations with your supervisor regarding like what you want out of your masters. Like once you do like apply, get in, like this might be a bit more of an involved conversation, but just kind of what you want out of it. What are some things that you're interested in kind of being involved with? And then I think it like really boils down to a time issue. Maybe this might not be the case as much for students in like a direct entry PhD or just in a PhD program, but a master's is only 2 years. And like it's kind of supposed to be like a trial period. If you love the research, you move on with a PhD. If you don't love it, like that's all right, move on with your life. And so I think it's important to kind of know that like yes, your research is important and it should come first, but there's a lot of like professional development opportunities that I don't think like you should let slide by either. So it's definitely important to set those expectations with your supervisor, and I think it also really helps if you go into those grad programs and apply with a supervisor that you already know really well. Obviously, this can still be a hit or a miss. But if you work in that supervisor's lab, if you like know their work ethic and they know yours and they know kind of just generally who you are as a person and what you want out of life, I think it makes the whole situation a lot easier. And then you're not like blindsided when they're like, no, I don't want you to do this thing, but you really want to do that thing.
Thank you. And Kathy?
I think that's something that a lot of new grad students kind of struggle with, and I did myself as well, is trying to figure out how to advocate for yourself while not being like too pushy, or you feel like you're bothering your supervisor sometimes, especially if your supervisor has like a lot of other students or they're just really busy people, which is always going to be the case. But you have to remember that, by taking you on as a student, they do also have like some sort of responsibility to you, and they are there to help you. And a lot of times students do feel bad for asking for things, but it's just something that you really have to normalize and remind yourself that it's okay. And that's essentially their job, is to help you. And I think another part of it is, for me, it's a little bit of a unique situation because I am co-supervised. So I do both more like forensic anthropology as well as like forensic/ancient DNA work. And so because of that, I kind of have like a little bit of a niche where within like the forensic anthropology side of things, I do more like DNA related stuff, whereas in the DNA sphere, I do stuff that's related to like humans and forensic cases, which is not something that a lot of the other people in my lab do. And so by pushing for like that direction and what you're trying to do specifically, and I guess in a sense what your research interest is and how that stands out, your supervisors will often have ideas and opportunities for you that like essentially only you could do. And I think that's a big part of it, is just establishing like what your interests are and making that clear to everyone. And if they want to kind of involve you in certain things, then those opportunities can come a little bit more easily.
Thank you. And just being aware of time, we'll end it on one last question here. Do you think that the forensic specialist program gives an advantage over the major when applying for jobs and masters?
I mean, I kind of touched upon this in the chat really quickly. I applied to both and I didn't get the specialization. I got the major, and I did not want to apply again for the specialization. I think in the beginning, I was like very upset because I was like, oh, I wish I got the specialization. Like it is definitely a little bit more like narrowed down. However, I definitely don't think it affected me when it came to applying to masters and jobs. A lot of my friends like were in the specialization and we both applied to masters and jobs kind of, and I don't think it really affected me. I think that like adding on to what somebody mentioned in the chat, having that like research experience either way, I think is still helpful. And I was able to get that through my biology major. And the main thing that I noticed that jobs that I applied to in the summer when I worked with the coroners, as well as some of my masters and interviews I had with professors, I think the main thing that people looked out and like were talked to me about a lot was, I don't remember the course code, but it was Murray's class where you write the book. Don't know what the course code is, but that is something that I got questioned a lot on. And I think I got questioned more on that, like having a published book and being published in something versus having research work. And I don't know if that was because I was in the middle of COVID and, you know, you couldn't get research work, but for me applying to jobs and still like right now I'm in interviews for jobs that I'm applying to, I'm getting a lot more questions on like being published versus like having research work.
And Angelica? Or you're muted.
Sorry about that. I was going to say like the one thing about the 481 like internship is like where you're placed. And I think that's supposed to be like the highlight of it essentially. Like I think it's more for you to make connection, and obviously like the research component is important, but it's also for you to make like those connections with individuals in the field, and for you to be able to like have kind of a feel for the organization that you're working for, and then kind of be able to go on from there to like find jobs in those kind of fields. Like for me specifically, I did my 481 I did my 481 with Dr. Navrosky. So at that point, Dr. Navrosky didn't have any grad students, and it was me and another peer of mine that was just kind of in the lab. So we like although 481 itself was like a struggle, like I think our research was a bit more streamlined and it was nice, and then we didn't have to kind of like hunt down like mentors and kind of figure out like schedules in terms of like how to go into like the lab and all that kind of stuff. Like that was a lot easier, and that's kind of how I got into my master's with her. So it was like, I would personally say that it was really helpful in the sense that like I just kind of got lucky. That was the first time that she was ever offering like an internship, like an FSC 481 internship with her. And then that kind of, and like she was starting up a brand new lab. So it kind of led itself into me like just finding myself here.
And to end it off with Wilson.
Okay, yeah, so I had a very similar experience with this, but I was actually in 482, 483. I don't know if they still offer that, which was really good because it did help me with my application because my research back then does pertain to what I'm doing now. But more importantly, the 482, 483 gave really good experience of what it was like working in a graduate lab. During my year, the 482, 483 group that I was working with had 5 members in it. Yes, 5 members. And it really did mimic what it was like to work in a graduate lab setting with sort of a larger group where everyone works on a similar project. But everyone is kind of doing their own thing. So it really did teach me that dynamic. So that's a good opportunity if you do find yourself applying for that.
Awesome. Well, we'll end it on that note. Oh, just to add on to that, I see Taylor's message. In my experience, your internship isn't always in your field of study, but it's really good research experience that will look great on any grad school app. So we'll end it on that. Thank you to the guests for joining and volunteering your time, and for the audience for being here. And I hope everyone learned something new. And yeah, so have a great rest of your Thursday night or afternoon if you're in BC. But yeah, thank you, everyone.